Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. I always knew I was going to make this video, but it was kind of a question of when. When I went through a hard time with dissociation, all I ever wanted to do was just push it away, forget about it and not bring it up again, because I was so scared that if I started to talk about it and research it again, that it would come back. The main reason I'm making this video is for awareness. When I was going through this, as much as I had the best support, like my boyfriend was amazing, my family was amazing, nobody could actually say that they understood what I was feeling or they've been there, and like that was something that I was really craving around me. I was just like, I want people to know what it feels like so they can completely understand me. I was less believable and less understood because I didn't know anyone else who had been through the exact same thing as me. When I described my symptoms, even to the doctor, when I went to see the doctor about what was going on, everyone just seemed a little bit confused by my symptoms, and I really, as much as I had, as I said, the best support, I didn't feel completely understood in my situation. Nobody for a second made me feel like it wasn't real or it wasn't happening to me, but I just feel like there's a huge lack of awareness around derealization, around Dpdr disorder, and I remember watching YouTube videos, like trying my best to find other people who were going through the same thing as me, and there was honestly very little in comparison to how big YouTube is, and like you can find a video about absolutely anything. There was so little on derealization and very little from people who were actually going through it themselves. Like there were some like psychologists and like information videos, but very few people sitting down and experiencing it themselves at that time. With the one exception, I will say Dodie Clark. Obviously you probably know her. If you don't, she's an amazing YouTuber, and I've been following her for years, way before I knew that she had derealization and before I kind of made that connection with what I was feeling myself. Derealization is often spoken about in terms of like Dpdr disorder, which is depersonalization derealization disorder. People tend to kind of put the two together and like intertwine them a little bit. Depersonalization is detachment from yourself, so you might look in the mirror and you look differently, or you might not recognize yourself. You might feel like you're not in control of your thoughts and your actions. You might feel like someone else is doing it for you. Like a lot of research that I did showed that people might feel like they're just robots and just going through the motion and they're not their true selves. Whereas derealization is when you know who you are, but you're detached to your environment. So your vision might be off, like things might look a bit closer or a little bit further apart. It feels like you're basically a little bit drunk and things are just, you recognize everything around you, but it doesn't feel like it's part of your life, it's part of your environment. Colours are a little bit washed out. I found when I was going through it, like my vision was really blurry, and for me, I didn't have any symptoms of depersonalization. Like I was completely at one with who I was, but it was my environment that was kind of scary and like detached for me. Derealization comes with a lot of physical symptoms as well, and so I experienced like blurry vision. Everything around me was a little bit darker, it felt like I just couldn't open my eyes wide enough. It also causes dizziness, so I remember for so long telling people that I was dizzy, and they were like, you need to go get your B12 checked, and I did, and I saw a doctor and my B12 was okay. It was a little bit low, but he said not low enough for me to be experiencing the dizziness that I was experiencing. I also got like a brain scan and that came back perfectly, and I didn't really know what it was. This was way before I kind of put two and two together with my physical symptoms of anxiety and derealization. I remember feeling these things like years back. Like I have like a really early memory of like 11 just walking down the stairs and like feeling like I couldn't open my eyes wide enough and that like I couldn't see, and at the time I thought it was just like I just started to wear like mascara. I felt like okay, maybe it's just the mascara, like I can't see properly, and it was always common enough for me at night time to just feel like a little bit detached, knowing the lights were down low and I was just chilling out in bed. Sometimes I'd just be like, Jesus, nothing around me actually feels real. And for years I was getting these random feelings where like my environment was just zoning out. Like you're sitting here normally and then it's like things just start to seem further away and like darker, and just there's no emotional attachment to your environment. Things just don't feel like they're actually there or that it's all actually happening. Growing up, I always had like a really big like imagination, and my mum told me that I always spoke with like imaginary friends, and like I'd always go off into like my own world, she said. So like, so when I was going through this, she sat and she was like, I feel like I can remember you always being this way on and off, like you'd always go into your own world, and I don't know if that's like the same thing or if I'm just like this my whole life. The one thing I will say that up until last year, the longest an episode lasted for me was like literally a few minutes, and at that time it never kind of startled me. It would just be like a weird feeling that I'd get, and I just thought everyone else was getting that feeling too, like you just, maybe I'm a bit tired, maybe I'm a bit run down. And it wasn't until I started watching Dodie Clark, like really watching all her videos and her vlog videos, and when I found out where she has Dpdr disorder, I know that she has both. Like sometimes she said that like she'll look at herself in the mirror and she'll see like her brother, and like she doesn't look like herself sometimes. I personally don't have that, but she has a mixture of both. But it was then it kind of clicked with me. I was like, oh my god, that's the sensation I always get. Is that not what happens to everyone now and then? So it finally clicked with me that it was a real thing, and I remember looking it up, and I think I just said it off the cuff one time to my boyfriend, like, do you know, like this disorder, I actually feel like that very frequently. And I remember I was going through a really, really stressful time over the course of a couple of months, and it was the first time that I ever experienced ongoing anxiety as well. So it all came into play, the stress, the anxiety. The time that it happened, I was going through a lot in my personal life, and I was having like a really stressful time in work, and me and my friends went to Amsterdam, and you all know what happens in Amsterdam. And I remember we all went for dinner before we went to the airport. I remember it was just like I was sitting there one minute, and then I just realised my environment just like kind of zooming outwards, like everything just like shifted, and I was so unsettled there and then, and I didn't tell anyone for hours what I was feeling. Every now and then I'd turn around and be like, do you feel very kind of spaced out right now, like do you feel strange? And they were like, yeah, but I don't think they actually were. I think they were just thought that I meant like, are you a bit tired as well, where I was really thinking like, oh my god, I'm completely dissociated here. Going through an airport when you have derealization is so frightening. I kept like going up to things and just being really startled and being like, oh my god, how am I going to get through this? I find airports daunting on a normal day. I remember getting on that airplane and I was like crying on the plane. The trip home was so long because we had to go to Dublin. Come home, I still had it. Like, bear in mind now, before this I'd only ever had derealization for like minutes at a time. We got back to Cork, I came home, went to bed, and when I woke up it was still there. That episode lasted 6 days for me, but I honestly thought that that was me for the rest of my life. If you do watch Dodie, you'll know that Dodie has derealization for the past 7 years, I think more actually, I'm not really certain. I was awake before my boyfriend that morning, and I remember thinking like, how am I going to tell him? He's going to think I'm absolutely insane, because that's what I felt. I was so scared to tell anyone because I was like, they're not going to understand what I mean. That's the stigma that so many people feel around mental illness. I remember the next day I had to call into work, and we have like a policy in work where we have to ring, we can't text. And let me tell you, when you're sitting there and you feel spaced out, I actually had a panic attack. I actually called work mid-panic attack, crying down the phone because I was so scared. I remember shaking so much that the phone fell from my hand. I feel like policies to call your boss in work, I know that there's situations out there where people take advantage of their sick leave in work, and I completely understand that, but when you're in a situation like that and you're mentally unwell, I really don't think you should have to make a phone call. And especially I think millennials, because we don't have the same skills as people older than us anymore, and a lot of us find that making phone calls in general bring on anxiety, never mind trying to ring work, tell them I'm sick, trying to explain why. It was horrendous. But anyway, after like day 3 of that, and I remember just waking up every morning, opening my eyes and just waiting to see if it was still there, and it was. I decided that I needed to stop like moping around, and I needed to like figure out what I was going to do. I did go to a doctor, and he did give me medication, but the doctor thought that this was a type of anxiety, whereas all the research I had done showed that it was actually dissociative disorder. That didn't really sit well with me. I felt like he was giving me something that was for something else, if you get me. Like, I'd feel like he didn't fully understand where I was coming from, and that's okay. Like, GPs aren't psychologists, like that's why they refer you to specialists. Like, they're there for like general health, and if there's anything a little bit more exotic, they're specialists for that. And like, I think he did his best, but I don't think it was the best choice for me, you know. So I came home and I took one, and I sat there with my boyfriend, and I was like, I'm not going to take any more. He did say that if I continued to take the medication, I would have to call him first before I decided to come off him, because I don't know, something with your body getting used to the medication, and it was a little bit dangerous to suddenly come off him. So I was like, I'm committing myself to this, and I actually haven't tried anything within my lifestyle to make myself feel better. At that time, I was putting a lot of pressure on myself with my body, with my appearance, with like the way I was living my life, and that was ongoing for the months before that. So I wasn't living a very meaningful life, and I definitely wasn't living like a mindful life. I started documenting every day how I was feeling, what made it feel worse, what times of the day I felt worse, what times of the day I actually got like snippets of like reality again. And that really helped. So if you are going through it, I do recommend like just writing everything down throughout the day and learning like when you feel you're most comfortable and when you don't, and just minding yourself and making sure that you're putting yourself in the best situations possible. At this point, I was comfortable enough to start researching what was happening to me, and I realised that 50% of the population feels derealisation at some point in their life. And I was so shocked by this, because I was like, I thought like I was me and like 1 or 2 people on the internet who was going through this, and like that was it. 50% of the population like has felt this feeling at some point or another. That gave me huge comfort, it really did. And I know that people who experience it long term or recurrently are a bit more rare, but like it was the fact that other people knew what it felt like, it just made me feel so much at ease. So I started talking to a couple of my friends and trying to explain it as best I could. I found out that a friend of mine felt the exact same way when trying different types of antidepressants. I also had another friend who said they experienced this feeling like before and during a panic attack, and I could just sit there and chat with them about it and be like, and do you think that this happens, and do you feel like this happens? Another thing to note as well, that there are other symptoms of derealisation that I didn't experience. So lack of emotion towards your loved ones and like people around you, and another one is distortion of time, and I didn't experience that. Like time felt as normal for me. I want to try and see if I can put like an effect here just to show you what it looks like as the person who's experiencing it. So like things around you start to look a little bit hazy, a little bit dreamlike. Colours for me weren't as vivid. I know that there's other symptoms that make things look really clear and sharp, but for me everything was just kind of hazy. And also with distance, things just seemed a little bit further away. It felt like I was kind of pushed back, watching everything from a different place. Once I got over that hump and got into really working on my day-to-day routines, I didn't experience derealisation for months. I think the first time I experienced it was about 2 weeks ago, which it didn't scare me, but it is also a little bit of a warning sign that I need to make sure I'm on top of my practices and doing what is best for me and my health. I had a lot of these warning signs for so long before I finally had derealisation for 6 whole days. So listen to your body and the signs that it gives you. If you feel like you're stressed, if you feel like you have a burning anxiety sensation for days on end, tune into why, tune into the way you're living your life. Are you living your life in a way that you're proud of? And that doesn't mean having like a really good job or getting a good income or having the perfect relationship. It just means that you're doing things that feel meaningful to you. You're speaking to yourself kindly, you're speaking to other people kindly. When you have more meaningful connections with other people and yourself, it really does help with putting your mind at ease, like completely. As far as the causes go for derealisation, there's no specific clear cause. The one thing that keeps popping up is like a really distressing experience, so like childhood trauma or being in war, but then that kind of confused me because none of those will be true to me. So instead of looking for a real cause, I just kind of came to terms with the fact that I wasn't dealing with life the way that I should be. I've always been someone to like subconsciously internalize things that are going on around me, and in the moment I could be dead set on the fact that I'm fine and nothing is affecting me, and then it will actually manifest itself later on in other ways. So there is no clear cause. If finding like a definite cause for you is important, I would just take that burden away and don't even stress about it. All you have to worry about is yourself now and the fact that you're in that situation, and how you can either have a meaningful life with derealisation or else work through the symptoms and hope that they get a little bit better. I will leave more information down below about Dpdr disorder, because obviously there's so much more to it. There's treatments, there's like support groups, and way more information than I can give. Like everything that I'm giving you now is just based on my own knowledge and my own experience with it. So I hope that more people are able to kind of tune into themselves and think, actually I have felt that feeling before in X, Y and Z situation. Because the more people who can acknowledge that they felt it, which is 50% of the population, you can be there for someone who might be scared and might be in an awful situation like I was, and be there for the other person who's absolutely craving someone to understand what they're going through in that moment. I'm going to leave it at that, guys. Thanks very much for everyone who took the time to watch this, and I'll see you all in my next one.